Don't mess with witchcraft. Hey, welcome to The Whole Truth, where I am taking you through the entire Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation, and we are not skipping anything. So if that sounds good to you, make sure that you reach down and hit the little subscribe button below, and then you can go over to thewholetruthbiblestudy.com and you'll find all of the videos in one convenient location. Now, today we are in Deuteronomy chapter 18. Chapter 18, and we're picking up in verse 9. And God is giving command to his people as they prepare to enter into the promised land. And he's telling them certain things that he wants and certain things that he doesn't want. And today he clearly tells them not to mess around with witchcraft. And he goes on to enumerate several other things like soothsaying. It's hard for me to say that with my little country accent, but no soothsaying, no conjuring up, trying to speak to the dead or evil spirits. Omens. Don't mess around with omens. Let's read it. Let's just read what it says first, and we're going to find some good practical application for our own lives. Here we go. This is Deuteronomy chapter 18. When you come into the land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. Well, what are those abominations? There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or soothsayer, or one who is an interpreter of omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations to the Lord your God, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God, for these nations which you will dispossess listened to soothsayers and to diviners, but as for you, the Lord your God has not appointed such for you. Woo, that was a list. Sorcerers, soothsayers, those who interpret omens, those who conjure spells, witchcraft, any of these things should not be named among you. Now let's be clear, you Israel, do not let any of this be named among you. Why? Because this is an abomination to the Lord. Why is it an abomination? Because God has called you to something different, Israel. Do not do this. You don't need other spirits to guide you. You don't need to conjure up the dead. You're not supposed to mess with any of those things. So do not let it be found among you, because this is an abomination to the Lord who has called you to something different. Now that's the context. What about for you and me? Oh, the truth is for you and I as well. We should not be messing around in our lives with witchcraft or soothsayers or conjuring up spells or any of the like. It is amazing to me how easily the Christian allows what God clearly says in his word. What God clearly says in his word, that we shouldn't be found among Israel. And God tells us in other places, the New Testament as well. We even see all the way in the book of the Revelation that they would not give up their sorceries. And I know that sorceries means pharmakeia and means drugs, but it also was a mixing and a conjuring of spells. Like that's the reason it was sorcery, was because they were trying to mix things together. And so some people have interpreted that to mean drugs, and other people have interpreted that to mean prescription drugs and what the medical field does. And I would say that what God really means is that he still wants to be first in our lives, and he doesn't want us to try to deal with the spirit world as if we have some sort of control or power over that. And yet that is exactly what many Christians do. And let me give you a fair warning. A lot of times it starts with your movies and your books. You're reading those books and you're watching those movies, and you act as if they have no effect on you. But one of the first effects that they have on you, you want to hear good advice from this pastor, one of the first effects that those movies and those books have on you is that they make it plain and acceptable to mess around with witchcraft and spiritual things that God has told you to stay away from. You know, if God was so clear in this list to say, don't do in verse 10, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritualist, or one who calls up from the dead. None of those should be found among you. But yet somehow we seem to think if it's in a movie, then it's okay. It's okay to be found among you as long as it's on a DVD, or now as long as it's streaming and you just put it on your TV and you just watch it. Well, friends, let me give you a fair warning. You are allowing things into your mind, and I'm going to tell you the truth. You're allowing things into your home that God said, these things ought not be found among you. These things are an abomination to God, and we shouldn't watch those kind of abominations, just the same as we shouldn't watch sexual things on television. And I would dare to take it as far as to say we shouldn't watch violent things. We are so desensitized to the idea of killing and shooting because of what we see with our eyes. But ask yourself this question: how desensitized have you become to spells and sorcery? Because we see it. There's also another problem which gives this indication that somehow you now have power. There was a young woman that I knew that practiced witchcraft when I was a teenager. And I asked her why she chose to practice witchcraft when she knew that she was worshiping the devil. And her words were this. She said, well, one, the devil doesn't insist that we worship him the way that you think that he does. And number two, he actually gives me power. I can do things. This is what this girl told me. Now, whether or not she could physically do those things is beyond the point. Her perception was that she could do things. And because she could do things, she had real power. And Christians don't seem to have real power. Well, I would contend to that, by the way. We have the power of prayer, and we have the power of the Spirit, and we see healings and miracles and all kinds of things all the time. But the difference is we have to wait on the will of God, and we can't control those things ourselves. But you see, what we do when we desensitize ourselves to witchcraft and sorcery is then we give the implication that somehow there's something real there that is, like a real power that somebody could really have. But here's the truth. If it's an abomination to God, which he says that it is, then it's not from God. Then you have to ask yourself the question, well, then what in the world are you messing with? What in the world are you trying to get your power from? Oh, do you see the danger when you start messing with these things? And then it goes further. It goes from like desensitizing it with movies and books, and then it goes into thinking that there's real power there. And then you end up with this, where somebody starts messing with it. Somebody starts playing around with it. I know there was a young man one time who was struggling with all kinds of things happening in their life and in their house, and they were under this crazy spiritual attack. And then the end result of it came out that they were also messing with witchcraft. That they were playing around with witchcraft and sorcery, and they were playing around with having seances and trying to call up spirits and call up the dead, and they were trying to do all of these other things. And then when all of this stuff was going crazy in their life and they wanted to know what was going on, come to find out they'd been messing with the very same thing that God had told them not to mess with. Friends, I need you to hear this. The Bible is pretty clear that you as a person are a body and a soul and a spirit. There's this crazy thing about a spirit. In the Bible, what we see is that your body can house more than one spirit. I find it interesting here recently. One of the kids in church said something joking. They made this comment about LGBTQ plus 2. I said, what is plus 2? I've never heard of that. And they said, oh, it's two-spirited. They mean that if you're two-spirited. Isn't that interesting? There's this guy in the Bible, and he's among the tombs. He's howling, he's crying out. He's taking stones, he's cutting himself. They can't chain him. He's so powerful, he break the chains, literally naked. They've tried to take things to cover him, but he just strips it back off. He cries all night. He tries to kill himself. He howls all night. He's homeless. Here's this guy, and Jesus finds him, and he sees that this man has got spirits, that the spirits run. The man runs up to Jesus, but it's all these spirits, and they said, what do we have to do with you, Jesus? And Jesus says, what's your name? And he said, we are legion, for we are many. There were many spirits living in that person. There's another story in the Bible of a man who had an evil spirit, but he gets rid of the evil spirit. The evil spirit goes out to a dry place and comes back, and he finds the man. He finds that the spirit sees it as a house, cleaned and swept, put together. So he goes and gets 7 others worse than him, and he brings them with him. And the last state of the man is worse than the first, because there were lots of spirits that were living in him. You see, your body can house more than one spirit. And because your body can house more than one spirit, you ought to be careful what you're allowing into your home, into your eyes, into your life, into your body. I don't know if you realize this or not, but the spirits who do try to take control don't have to ask permission. This is not Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They don't stand at the window and knock. And sometimes you hear these, I don't know why I made that face when I just said it that way, but whatever. You hear these pastors that are like, oh, because you've allowed it in. Well, yes, in many cases you do allow it in, but it's not in the sense of I have to give it permission and somehow they trick me to go, okay, you can come in to do whatever. No, you're allowing it in by the things that you're doing. There was the movie that came out the other year called Nefarious, and this guy had this evil spirit, and it's kind of like a Screw Tape Letters type of a thing. And he's saying that the way that he got that spirit, the way that he was possessed by that demon, was because he had allowed it. And the guy questioned him, was saying, well, how did you allow it? And he goes through this. It's a whole bunch of little things. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one thing. It's not like one day you make this one permission, but it's all the little things. When you start allowing pornography in your life, and you start allowing other sins in your life, lying in your life, and those sorts of things, it starts there, but it creeps and it grows. And when you start with something like, well, it's just a Ouija board. Well, they're just crystals. We're just kids playing a game, having a seance. We're just seeing if anything would happen. What you don't realize is you're allowing things into your life that God has said you shouldn't have any part of. So let me be clear, whether it's symbols, things that you're wearing on your jewelry, things that maybe you have in your home. I had a young woman tell me, even recently, she was recently saved and then tried to justify to me that pentagrams, she said something about pentagrams, and I said, whoa, you have pentagrams, you need to get rid of those. And she said, oh, well, pentagrams aren't what you think they are. Pentagrams keep evil spirits away. No, they don't. Pentagrams do not keep evil spirits away. You are allowing things into your life that God has told you not to allow. So whether it's symbols, whether it's some sort of little statues or idols, whether it's, and I'm going to be honest with you, even if it's those idols that don't seem so bad, I don't think you ought to have little Buddha statues in your house. I don't think that they're cute. Oh, cute little fat Buddhas sitting there like the Chinese restaurant. No, you should not allow those things in your home, because when you do that, you're opening yourself up to a spirit world that you actually have no control over. Jesus is the only one who was able to demonstrate a power over the spirit world. Otherwise, you're fighting a battle that's not against flesh and blood, and you're letting enemies into your territory. Well, I hope you found some use out of this video today, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow as we get a little further into Deuteronomy chapter 18. I'll see you then.